everyone, and welcome back to 15 with Fausta, the podcast. My guest today is Nita Tucker. Nita is the founder of the Florentine, which I have to say is really something that it is the English language newspaper in Florence, and I am very attached to it. And I'm very grateful to her for coming here today. We met for the first time, although I've known about you for forever, but we had the pleasure, it was really a pleasure to meet you at a networking event that the Florentine did. It was a celebratory event for your 20th year. And I had the pleasure of meeting with you and chatting with you. And of course, I couldn't not invite you on the podcast. And I'm very grateful that you accepted because I'm thrilled to have you here today with me.
Thank you. It's so much fun. And it's so nice to be associated with the success of the Florentine. You know, I watch it now. You know, I was the one that made it happen initially, but I'm watching the success. I'm a very proud mother.
You should be.
Yeah.
You should be. You're the mama of the Florentine. And honestly, it's such a gift to our community and to the city. And I'm grateful to you on a personal level, but also it helps me professionally because everything is there, you know, and I can say to my clients or my listeners, you know, the Florentine, it's my go-to and it should be yours too. So thank you for everything you've done to make that happen. And it's been wildly successful.
Really, it has been. And like I said, you know, the people who are running it now have really done that. You know, Helen is amazing.
Yeah.
She's taken it to a place I never dreamed of.
Yeah. So I want to talk about your first encounter with Florence. I'd like to start there. We were talking a little before we started about how you came to Florence many times before you decided to make it your home for a while. So tell me more about those first encounters with Florence.
Well, I'm just thinking, I think I was maybe 20 when I came here, hitchhiking around Europe. That my parents didn't know I was hitchhiking around Europe. So it was just another place. I saw the David, I saw the Uffizi. We ate our way through Florence's, pasta and gelato and gelato and gelato and gelato. So it didn't strike me, Italy struck me as, romantic and wonderful and all that. And so it wasn't until I'd come back a couple other times, traveling through Europe, but it was mostly I never did a junior year abroad, and I always wanted to, and I don't know why I didn't, but I switched schools a lot, and I just never did it. And I had always wanted that experience of living abroad, so I've traveled all over the world, but I'd never lived any place, and I wanted that very badly. And when I turned 50, it still hadn't happened. Even though I had, to kind of look for jobs in the Financial Times and things like that, but nothing ever panned out. And when I turned 50, my mother died at 54. And when I said, you always think you're going to die when your parents die.
Of course, yeah.
And I went, if I don't do it now, it may never happen. So I just took the leap. And my husband was so funny. He was saying, it's not my dream. And I said, well, we'll miss you. And because I didn't want to talk him into it. I didn't know that it would work out and all that. I wanted him to come. And I knew he would. I never worried about him not coming. But he did come. And the reason I picked Florence is I had friends who had lived there right before us, and we visited them a few times. Okay. We come and visit. And I walked around the streets, and I went, I always wanted a walking life. I never lived in New York City, and I always lived in places. I grew up in Detroit. You don't walk anywhere in Detroit. And I wanted a walking life, and I could see walking kids to school and doing, just being that way and I did it with my friend. I kind of saw how she was living. I said, this is good. I can handle this. And so I picked Florence.
Yeah. And how long did you live here when you
I lived here 5 years.
Okay.
I lived here 5 years. And the only reason I left, my husband thought we were coming for a year, but I thought I was coming for 4 years, whatever. And we ran out of money after a year. We had sold our house and we ran out of money. So, people say the way to leave Florence with $2 million is to come with $5. So I left with a lot of debt, but it was worth it all. And so he left after a year and to work, and so my daughter and I were living in this incredible villa in Santa Ambrosia, and my husband was living in a shack in L.A. and, seeing what we were doing by the credit cards.
Right.
But I just thought that the Florentine would make money. Yeah. He was a businessman. He could see what was going on.
Right.
So I stayed here 5 years, and the only reason I left is my son's girlfriend got pregnant, and I couldn't be a Nona there. I had to be back.
And and that completely makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So at some point during this time, you and your husband have the idea for the Florentine.
Right.
Can you tell us a little more about that origin story? How was it born?
It was, so I was working. I'm an international consultant, so I could travel from here, just, like I could travel from the States. So I was working. He didn't know what to do with himself. I said, why don't you take a sabbatical? And he was trying to learn Italian and trying to connect here. And he was trying to read a newspaper. He always read a newspaper every day. And he was trying to read a newspaper in Italian with 2 weeks of Italian and could not do it. And he kept saying, there should be an English language newspaper here. There is one in Paris. There's one in Russia. There's, all that.
Of course.
And so he was kind of driving me crazy. I said, why don't you start one? And he's a financial guy. He's not a literary guy. But he started doing due diligence. He was head of, a sports team, a financial guy for a sports team. And so he thought big, and he's trying to do diligence on having a newspaper in a place that never had a newspaper anyway. So I came back from one of my work trips. I said, okay, I'm starting a newspaper. And just like that, I said, I'm starting a newspaper. And he got on board, and it started from a toilet, is what I say. And that I was just wanting local news, because what had happened was the windows at Santa Croce had been broken during a storm. And I was 4 blocks from Santa Croce, and I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know what was going on in my own city, so I wanted that kind of news. Anyway, so I had an Italian teacher, and she had a little studio in Santa Spirito up on the second floor, the first floor.
Right.
And to go to she didn't have a bathroom, so to go to the bathroom, I had to go down the floor and walk 2 doors to her husband's place of business, which was like a graphics, and they did websites at the beginning and graphics. And I'd go to the bathroom, and there were 3 partners there, Italian guys, and they were hysterical, and they always made fun of me. They made fun of my Italian. They made fun of, they just joke with me. And outside the bathroom door, they'd be having coffee, and we'd be joking, and they always made fun of me. And when I decided to start a newspaper, I called up one of them, Leo, and I said, Leo, where do I get something printed? I was looking for Kinko's printing
like copy stores. Right?
Yeah, and he said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to do a newspaper. And he called me up, and he said, we want to do it with you. And they became, they're still running it.
Yeah.
20 years later, 21 years later. Isn't that amazing to have that kind of relationship with people I didn't know except from the toilet, and that it worked, that we trust each other, we love each other, we've worked together, and that's kind of the whole Florentine. It's been a little bit magical in that way, of wonderful relationships. And we started, and I'll never forget, Tony getting on his bicycle to deliver the first issue. And he said, my first job was a newspaper boy. And I guess here I am, 60 years old in my other job. My daughter, she was 15 at the time, and they passed out the newspaper. She got all her friends to pass it out because the newspaper's free in Piazza Repubblica. They each had a, piazza. And I remember at the Odeon, people would go for the films, and they sat outside the Odeon and they gave newspapers, and we have this beautiful picture of everybody in the Odeon with the newspaper. It was the first issue. Yeah. So, but it took a while for it to be accepted, and especially among Italians, because their friends didn't read it, so why would they want to advertise in it, even though their customer base were English-speaking people, but it was really interesting because their friends didn't see it. They put their ads in Corriere della Sera,
of course.
La Bella Figura. And so it took a long, long time. And still, I'll walk around, I'll meet people in Florence, and they've never heard of it.
Really?
Italians.
That's so strange to me. I love this story. I love it because I think it speaks to a lot of the things we were talking about before, community, the way those magical encounters do happen in Florence. And they happened even more 20 years ago.
Yeah.
They can still happen, but 20 years ago, I think we were a little more connected. And it doesn't surprise me. I was going to ask you, what was the reception like at the beginning? Because I've, in my mind, it's always been here. Yeah. And so for me, I just remember, at a certain point, either picking it up at the paperback exchange, or I think at the beginning, you probably delivered it to Stanford. Because I was, And so
we definitely did.
For me, it's always,
to all the schools.
Yeah. So it's always just kind of been a part of my life here, But I can imagine it wasn't easy at the beginning because Florence does still have kind of a small town mentality, and people aren't always so on board with change. But it's surprising to me that there wasn't something like it before because the Anglo-American community here is huge. The foreign population is huge.
Right.
And so there was definitely, you and Tony were right. There was definitely a need for something like that. There was no news source in English. Once in a while you could get an article in the International Herald Tribune that talked about, but this was pre-internet. This was really the internet, the iPhone wasn't around yet, the internet was there for sure, but it certainly wasn't like it is today where we just get notifications on our phone in real time and we know what's going on anywhere in the world, right? So what you were doing is really revolutionary.
It had already been done in other cities, so it's not like that. But it really was. And I think I discovered an unknown talent that I kind of knew what, because we got all the news from ANZA, which is
Associated Press.
And then it's to choose what pieces, because we couldn't do every piece of news. And I think I had a good sense of what would be interesting or appropriate and all that. So I didn't know that about myself, and I did that. I had no journalism background whatsoever. And it was people, I was really looking at, what people needed to hear what was going on, but also what would make their stay here, and I'm talking about the people living there, make it more meaningful, make it more interesting, and things that I was surprised at that other people went, oh my God, you took me into that. So it was such a delight to be able to do it, and I'm such a curious person, and I still. Anytime I see an open door, I'm here for a few months, and I walk in and, Poso and come in and see, and I keep meeting more and more people and seeing things that I'd never seen before. You can be in Florence forever, and you still don't
make discoveries every day.
Every day. Of things people are doing or finding out, or exhibits or something like that. And And I'd go up to be, can I do an article on you? And everybody wanted one. It wasn't it wasn't hard.
No.
There were a few people that didn't trust me. I remember, that wanted the questions before. And I said, I'm I have one newspaper, for one English language newspaper. So I can't afford to, it's not about getting a scoop or anything like that or finding out something terrible. But, that wasn't my job.
Yeah. And it wasn't your angle. I think what you really did and what you still what you absolutely still continue to do with the Florentine is it's a community builder. It's a way of, and I love what you said about, finding things that will be helpful and of interest to people who are living here. Florence has a lot of people who kind of just pass through, whether those be study abroad students, people who come for, work, for extended stays. Florence draws a lot of people. And, to have this really incredible source of information was a great service to do for those members of the community who didn't speak the language. It's hard to imagine that somebody just coming for 3 months or just coming for a year can master the language. So I love the fact that it's really served as a bridge between the local Florentine culture and all of the foreign visitors who've been coming here for centuries.
For centuries. And and it's interesting. I just thought it would be Americans and British.
No.
But the Swedish and the Germans, there's so many people that speak English and don't speak Italian. So I was in wonder of, people, I knew, and they were from Brazil and they were they all knew the Florentine. I just didn't think of all these different things, and then how it was so useful to the community.
Yeah.
Because again, it's interesting how, people didn't accept it. And there were things happening in the community that I said, you should give them to us. Oh, we have it on our website in English. And I went, first of all, I don't know what's going on. I'm not known to look on your website. And the English was atrocious.
Oh my
gosh. Was horrifying. I said, we'll do it for free. Well,
Please let me help you.
I would go into museums and offer to, use our staff to help the museums do translation. No, we have people on our own.
It's not working. Yeah, it's not working. It's gotten better. But man, at the beginning, some of those websites were abominable.
And then, finally, they started understanding that we could be a service to them. And we did the first thing that we did with the community, which was disaster financially, but it was such an incredible thing, was we did the 40th anniversary of the flood.
I remember that one. Was
that amazing?
Amazing. I remember that very well.
Amazing issue. And we did it with the community, and we just put it together. It was amazing feat that we did, and Ted Kennedy came, and there was a big thing at Villa La Pietra, but it was all, the Florentine was the center of all of it, and so that. We did a service for them.
Absolutely.
We did a service for them.
Yeah, and the flood was something I think that, and that's a great thing that you did.
50th anniversary now, isn't it coming up to the 50th?
I think it's next year. It's November 2026, right?
Yeah.
Because it was in 66.
Yeah.
And I think, the flood of 66 is something that drew so many people to Florence.
The Mud Angels.
Mud Angels, and showed how many people had Florence in their hearts. And so you're being the epicenter for that, or the point of, let's say, where, the point of connection, if you will, probably also just was sort of like, okay, we're legit, we're here to stay, and we are a part of the city's fabric.
But the city acknowledged
exactly.
it. I didn't get invitations, press invitations.
No.
I would have to find and kind of work my way in. And we weren't considered like the real press.
Yeah.
And now, Helen has all this stuff. I used to sneak in, right?
Now you get like a press badge with your name, and you get invited, every day. There are like 20 things going on.
We weren't considered like the real press. It was really funny.
Well, good for you for persevering, and good for you for being the person you are. And I want to stay on the topic of community, because it's very clear by what you're saying that, community is very much in your heart. It's something you are committed to and really believe in. And I'd be curious to know what what you do in your daily life to keep building community and cultivating community here in Florence or elsewhere.
So I moved. I lived in Seattle, and you get community, but with your kids, young kids, because you have play dates and all that.
Right.
And when then we moved to Santa Fe, and my kids were a little bit older, and I didn't have, like friends there. And I remember a girlfriend of mine who lived in New York, and she would invite everyone she met that week that was interesting. She would invite over for spaghetti dinner on Friday night.
Nice.
And so I did that in Santa Fe. Anyone who I met, like in a bookstore or whatever, I'd invite them over. And I just would have, in the conversations, and people love to be invited.
Oh, yeah.
People love to be invited to dinner.
Yeah,
okay?
You're right.
So I did that in Santa Fe. So I did that here because my daughter was 15, and the kids, you don't do play dates with the kids.
No, 15-year-olds don't want anything to do with parents.
All that.
Usually.
But anyone I met, I invited over for dinner on Friday, here. And then when it started the paper, I would meet interesting people on interviews and all that. But I would say, would you come for dinner? I'd love to have. And I had like these salons at my house in Via Gable. And I come back today. I'm in Florence now, and it was 15 years since I lived here, but I come back all the time. And these two women that I was with, who were best friends, and someone said, "How did you meet each other?" We met in Nita's dining room. They're Italian.
I love that.
So all these people are friends from my salons and my dining room. And then I started, so I was friends with the head of NYU. I was friends with the head of Syracuse, Barbara Demley. I was friends with the Consul General, Nora Dempsey.
I remember her well, yeah.
So I was friends with all, and I said, and Louise Ferragamo, and she had gone to, there was a thing for Paul Newman, who started Dynamo, the
Dynamo Camp,
camp here. And so she was saying it, how much her mother, her grandma, the La Signora Ferragamo had given a dinner and all that. I said, what we should do is we should do something good together, because we would have these lunches, all these incredible women that I met and I introduced. I said, let's do something good. And we invited the head of the Dynamo Camp, and I said, what can we do to raise money for you and help you? And we took it on like you wouldn't believe. We raised so much money.
Good for you.
But, we knew at Eli Lilly, we knew the people at G and all that stuff. So I like having friendships that then do something together. And we did. We had so much fun. The head of Dynamo, this woman, she says, what do you do how are you all together? Oh, well, we have lunch, we go shopping, and then we raise money for we do. She says, I want to be with you. I said, you are with us.
Well, exactly. And I think it sounds, it seems so obvious, but not a lot of people do stuff like this, Nita. And not a lot of people just say like, hey, you're interesting. Come over for dinner, you know, and putting those people together who are like-minded, who have the same passions, who want to help, who want to keep building community and do something good for the communities. So, I think we often lose our sense of that now, how easy it is to extend an invitation, to have someone in your home, And so I love that answer, because I think it really speaks to a lot of what is kind of lacking right now.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, and people don't go outside their little space.
Right.
And I have so many different communities here, but I do in LA also. And but I have the boldness to say, I remember at doing an article on the with Principe's Corsini, Georgina, and she does Artigiani Festival and everything. Yeah. So we were coming over to talk to her about it and all that, and she was talking about the art and all, and I said, "Do you paint?" I just had the feeling of, and she said, "Yeah," and I said, "Can I see what you paint?" And she takes me up into her bedroom. Her studio's outside her bedroom. And I go into her house, and I said, "You live like this?" She had these paintings and all, but it was just my, "Can I see your paintings?"
Yeah. Just having the ability to. Not everyone has that, Nita. The ability to connect with someone, to read them, and to be bold enough to ask a question. I think I've realized with the podcast, people love talking about themselves, right?
Right.
And I think everyone's story deserves to be heard. And recognizing somebody's passion and going with it, I think that's like a very admirable quality, just really kind of understanding people, and seeing something in people. And then, but not just saying like, okay, I'm leaving it at that, but really pursuing it is something wonderful that you have. Yeah. You say you're not a journalist, but you are a prolific author. And I wanted to quote something from one of your books, and we'll talk about your other books later, but the book you wrote about the Florentine, It Happened in Florence, because it is autobiographical, and we're getting a real sense of who you are. And the book is a story about living a life with no regrets, celebrating the discovery that those who love you most will love you all the more for living a life without compromise. Can you tell me more about that?
Where'd you read that? Or did you?
I think I read it on one of the sort of the blurb for the book. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I wrote the book about 13, 14 years ago, so I don't. So when there was that, I'm just going to go. At one point, we ran out of money.
Yeah.
We were, I did 4 years on credit cards.
Oh man!
That I think I paid off by now. And my husband was a financial guy, so it was against everything in his being. So he went back to the States after a year and found a job, do a business. And everybody thought I was horrible because I wasn't staying with my husband, that I wasn't going back with him, and including him. But I had a newspaper here, so it wasn't like I had nothing here and I needed to go, I believed in the newspaper financially, which was stupid. But, it was a commitment that I had. It was my life, and it was, important to me, and I was committed to it. So a lot of people thought I was selfish for staying here. And including him and his close friends. And I realized there's a difference between, and a fine line between being selfish and being true to yourself.
Yeah.
And it took a lot of courage on my part I didn't defend myself. I didn't, all that. At one point, my husband said, I'll leave you, or, and I knew that my relationship was worth fighting for. I had a great marriage, and I said, listen, I love you. I'm committed to you. We saw each other every 6 weeks. We talked every night. It wasn't like, I had abandoned him and was off gallivanting with the Italian men. That never happened. And I said, and this is, I can do them both. I said, this is, a commitment of mine. This is what I need to do. And if he needed me, I would have been there in a second.
Yeah.
But he was like mad at me for not being there. Who wants to be with someone who's mad at you? And our relationship was always one of supporting each other.
Yeah.
It was always that way. It was never trades. It was always giving. And he got it. He just got it at one point that this was, his love for me was to support this.
Yeah.
And, our relationship transformed. So our relationship actually got better and deeper at that point. But we risked it not happening, and
God, it's a beautiful story because I think you really make it clear that he got that this was a huge part of you and how unhappy you would have been to abandon this labor of love, this passion
to be
of
with
yours.
Someone who is mad at me.
To be with someone who's angry with you. And that's a real testament, I think, to your relationship. Yeah. And you're an expert on relationships.
Yeah.
And I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Okay, this part of the conversation. Tell me more.
Things are going to get juicy now. But you are a relationship expert, and you've authored and co-authored a whole bunch of books on this subject. Right. And I'm going to just rattle off a few titles. But Beyond Cinderella, How to Find and Marry the Man You Want, and how not to screw it up, 10 steps to an extraordinary relationship. And then the one that I'm particularly interested in, given that I'm over 50, single, and just got out of an 8-year relationship, but I still believe in love, Nita.
I love it.
How Not to Stay Single After 40, The Secret to Finding Passion, Love, and Fulfillment at Last. So what do you think is the secret to an extraordinary relationship? And what advice would you give to those who are still looking and have almost lost hope?
Right. My first book, which was Beyond Cinderella, was written right after there had been an article or a study from Harvard and Yale that you had if you were over 40, you had a higher chance of being hijacked than you did of finding a relationship. Mm-hmm. There was a study by Harvard. Do you remember that?
I remember something like that.
It made my book kind of a bestseller at that point. And it was interesting. But, most people have this image, especially women, that when you least expect it, it's going to happen, or there's this, they'll appear, and
right.
When you're not looking, that's when you find them, and all these myths, and they come from when we were in school. Most people found relationships in high school and college.
Yeah.
That's where
sure.
Most people found relationships. So they weren't looking, but they were, everything they were doing was socializing. They were meeting, we went to the library to study, not because it was quiet, but because we socialized.
Sure.
Even studying was a social activity.
Absolutely.
So then leave school, you might have a job with, a small amount of people and all that, and you're wondering why it's not happening when you're not looking.
Yeah.
So, people are stupid, and we don't do a job. Well, a job's going to come when I least expect and when I'm not looking, and it's going to come and get me.
No.
So we're very practical about things that aren't even as important as a relationship. Relationship may be the most important part of your life. Your relationship with, that's who you have a family with and all that. And then we're going to leave that to when you least expect it, and it's going to come in, when it's supposed to happen. So that's one of the myths, but it comes from, we were doing something. So you need to do something about it, and I think about it as we're talking. That's how I made the newspaper. I do stuff. I didn't wait for someone to come say, I want you to do an article, on me. Take, that.
No.
I asked people, and I went looking. So I made a project out of finding a relationship and not, just, how to meet people, where to meet people. There were principles that were really interesting. And so I'm single now. My husband died
sorry, Nita.
6 months ago. But he'd been gone. He had Alzheimer's and been gone for a long time. So I started dating about a year ago. And I'm taking my advice. I'm taking every piece of advice from, and I'm old. I'm 75, and hard and blah blah blah. And men who I'd be interested in, with like a 50-year-old and they can get them. And, so I have all these odds against me. But one, we're just looking for one, and the most important thing is that you've got to do something to meet people. And I'm on the apps.
You are. Good
I am on the apps.
Good for you.
And the apps don't narrow, there was dating services when I was single.
Yeah.
And people think that's going to, narrow it down and find a person for you. The apps don't find a person for you. They just get a flow.
Yeah.
And people say, I'm very picky and that's why I don't have a relationship. And I say, I think you should be very picky, but you have to have a lot of people to be picky from.
Yeah.
You can't, I've been on one date and all men are this way, or all people on apps are that way, or all that, from one person they met or they heard about. So you have to meet people and the thing of not wasting, I don't want to waste my time with something that it's never going. I said, what do you have to do? Binge watch?
Yeah, you're right. How much time do you waste on social media?
I mean, excuse me. And it's not a waste of time. If I meet someone, have lunch with them or a drink and all that, and it doesn't turn into taking out a mortgage together, does not mean it wasted my time. I'm interested in, I already just said I'm interested in people. I'm even interested in losers. They're interesting to me. The people aren't boring. So you're not wasting your time, and you don't know. And so, I'll go on dates and people say, how are you finding the dating apps? And everybody complains,
of course.
And I go, I'm having fun. And they, I immediately become attractive because I'm not a complaining, bitter, whatever, woman. So and you don't know. I mean, I think that people say, oh, I don't need a relationship. I have a good life. And, that's kind of like saying, I don't need a relationship, but I want one, and it's okay to want one. It doesn't mean you're needy and desperate. So a lot of women especially, I'm okay on my own. I'm fine on my own. I don't want to live my life alone. I love being in a relationship.
Yeah.
And I'm not ashamed of that.
And you shouldn't be. You love love. I'm the same way. And so this is all very relatable to me because I also am very optimistic like you are. And I love meeting people. And I think that one of the major problems right now, and it's something that's finally getting the attention it needs, is that there is not only this crisis of solitude, but people don't go out anymore. They don't meet people. You talked about the example of, for example, when we were in college or in high school. But I would say even,
in college, they're like this.
Right. And so it's the young generations are a little different. But, for us, it was kind of like, if I think about when I was a young adult, how easy it was to meet people because you were just always somewhere. You were at, a concert, or you were even just like browsing in a bookstore and you would strike up a conversation or whatever. And so there are now more, I see all, once in a while, these initiatives. There's this woman who organizes, she has something like get off your phone Wednesday or whatever and go out to a bar, go out somewhere to meet people. And I love what you say because I think it speaks a lot to your general philosophy of life and this openness you have, right? Like you have to go out and get what you want. And if you don't go out and try, in other words,
for sure,
you're never going to get it. So you might have to go through a bunch of different people, but I love the fact that you find value in even those things that don't pan out because I think that's what we've lost. You remember like when you could just, strike up a conversation with a stranger and have a really great conversation. But that's it. It doesn't have to go anywhere. It wouldn't necessarily, especially, the old days before cell phones, to find somebody again was not easy. And so unless they gave you their number and their address, we didn't have this, you could put your phones together and instantly have each other's number. And so we've lost those sort of magical serendipitous encounters, which sometimes saddens me, which makes me realize I'm getting older too. But, I love those kinds of connections, even if they're just suspended in a moment, because they do give us something. Yeah, even the bad ones, right?
Even the bad ones. It's not, and I don't tell stories about, horrible dates and stuff like that. And, when I wrote my first book, Modern Woman's Guide to Finding a Prince, and people, oh, you should interview me. I've been divorced 3 times. I said, not my interest.
No.
I want someone who's been successful in relationships, not, how not to screw it up.
Right.
I'm interested in people who are successful. I don't want to hear someone who's been divorced 3 times. And they think, you learn from your mistakes. Not necessarily. I learned a lot from people who mastered something and done it. So it's, it can be fun. It hurts, but the reason people don't do it is because they can't stand rejection. It's all about rejection. It has nothing to do with anything else. Doesn't have to do with waste of time. Doesn't have to do with, men are this way. It's the fear of rejection. And when you're going to get rejected, and you can live with it.
And you'll also reject.
Yeah.
And that's part of the game.
It's part of the game. And you will get rejected, and if you can't deal with it, then you should be happy being alone if you can't deal with rejection. But rejection, when you go, they just didn't like you, that.
You don't like everybody in this life. And I think the older we get, we realize that. But that's still, I think your attitude and the sort of hopefulness is something that I love. And I think we all need more hope now.
Yeah.
And we all need more love. Whatever, whatever shape that takes. It doesn't have to be romantic love too. What you were saying, maybe one of these encounters leads to a new friendship, a business relationship, who knows what, it doesn't matter, but it's the connection. It's the human connection, Nita.
It's really, but I think going back to the shame of wanting a relationship is number one in all my books, is that it's nothing to be ashamed of that you want to love someone and be loved. Mm-hmm. It's nothing, and people are ashamed of it. I have a great job and I have a great relationship with my children. That's like saying, do you want a car? And they say, no, I have dishes. It has nothing. I'm glad that you have a great relationship with your kids. I'm glad that your job is fulfilling. It just doesn't keep you warm at night, in the same way. So we have to, first of all, again, I want that. Yeah. And a lot of people don't say that, aren't willing to say it.
And there's a real crisis right now for women, I would say, mostly, successful, financially independent women over whatever age you want to give it, because we are being fed this message, you don't need it. But, maybe some people don't, but I do. Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I said it right from the start. I'm a hopeless romantic. I'm someone who stays in, I love relationships. So taking a break, but I'm open, and that might be a year from now. It might be 5 years from now. It doesn't matter. Yeah. But when I won't lie to myself about that.
Good.
Right?
Good for you. Good for you.
And I'm really appreciative.
I'll say maybe I'm weak. I just don't want to defend myself. I never defend myself.
Why should you?
Yeah, but, and I just admit, I want one. I have friends saying, God, Nita, you're the... I said, yeah, but I want one.
Why? I see, for me, it's fine. Also because, how can you be ashamed of saying that you still believe in love and you want to find that again? Right. And you want to feel that again. Well, it's a beautiful thing.
People have had really good relationships.
It's a sign that you had a really good relationship.
No, but it's also, though, I think, I've had my great love. Now I'm, Yeah. And it's, fortunately, my brother-in-law, my husband's family and all that are so, they just know how much I love Tony through the whole thing. And they get excited if I go out. I mean, they want, and of course Tony would have that, but, Nita, I like you happy. It's fun having you happy and excited.
Yeah. And also, that's a part of you, and you can't deny a part of you.
Okay.
I want to shift gears a little and talk about your latest book.
Yes.
Because you are, you do a lot. You're a coach and a speaker. You have over 40 years of experience as a management consultant. You have a brand called Realizing the Possible, which shouldn't be surprising to anyone who's been listening so far. And you've helped thousands of leaders fulfill their potential. So I want to talk about your latest book, which is called Nobility, the Essence of Leadership. Can you tell us a little bit about the book? Just came out a couple of months ago, right?
Yeah, I'm very proud of it. So my main work for money, I've done a lot, I've never made money on my books, though I would love that to be just a writer.
Yeah.
Is as a management consultant and now what they call them executive coach. So I was in the first. I'm so old that when they use coach only for sports. Right. And I was there when they started using coaching in business.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like there,
For the moment that it gained the new meaning.
And so now I'm, an executive coach. I do the same stuff, but it's now just a different title. And I work with leadership, and and it's not even realizing their potential in leadership. It's the work I do with leadership, and I work with top
top executives, CEOs.
But Cisco, global companies, all that. So, that I realized being from a manager to a leader is a state change. So think of state change as going from water to steam. That's a state change, right? Now, there are principles of dealing with water. We know how to harness it for energy and use it, for storage and cooking and cleaning and moving things. We know there are principles of dealing with water. And like that, there's principles of management. There's managing by results and, supporting people and organizing and game plans and everything like that. Now, the principles of water don't apply to steam. Steam has a whole different set of principles. And in fact, if you treat steam like it's water, it becomes water. Mm-hmm. Okay, so and steam isn't better than water. It's just a state change. And the principles of dealing with steam are different than water. And they're a little not as concrete as water. The same is true of leadership. There are different principles of leadership that aren't, it's not like you're better and better and better at a manager and then you become a leader. It's different principles. And again, they're not as concrete. Yeah. So I work with the principles of leadership and work with those. And it's not a leader as being better than a manager. So CEOs need to know how to manage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But most leaders don't know the principles. They may operate from them. They may have a gut feeling of them, but they're not they're not translatable. Okay. So they can't have other leaders because they're kind of like, I just do it this way, or I'm this way, or all right. That. So when I work with leaders mostly that are already leaders to be more cognizant and scalable of their leadership. So knowing the principles they're operating with rather than just their gut.
Okay.
And they can translate them better. So that the book is about that. And I put nobility because I had a lot of experience of nobility here in Florence, living in Florence. And there's the nobilita, there's the noble families. But I'd find cab drivers here knowing, Tosca and, understanding
That's right.
art and opera. And then I'd find young generations of noble families that had never been in the Uffizi. Mm-hmm. So there's an experience of nobilità that I noticed here, and which is, living at a higher level of, not a higher level of arrogance, a higher level of principles and thoughts and all that. And so when I work with leadership, I'm always having them look at their highest self of being. And I say leadership is not a default way of being, it's an intentional way of being.
Absolutely.
And who are you going to be as a leader? So it's more about them clarifying to themselves who are they as a leader, who are they going to be as a leader, and what are the principles of leadership, and there are 10 principles. And I love the book because it's mostly for my clients because they forget. And also, a job of a leader is to engender other leaders. Leadership is not about dominance. A lot of people think it's dominance, and we're living in a world where it's that way. But that it's a nobility. It's an essence of a leader is someone who people voluntarily follow.
Yeah, I when I read the title, I said there's got to be a Florence connection here. I knew it because it's an unusual title to see in a book about business, right? We rarely talk about those things. Rarely go hand in hand. I love this beautiful nuanced approach that you just spoke about, and I'm glad you very conveniently brought it back to Florence for me, because we are getting to the end of the podcast, and I want to talk to you about something that I just mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, and it's so evident, though, that Florence is so within you, and you love it as much as I do. And there's a lot of talk now about the changing landscape of the city, and I'm curious what you think we can do as Florentines and adopted Florentines to preserve the city's immense beauty and heritage, which, but still looking toward the future. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I went to Bhutan last year, and it was before my husband died. It was, it became a spiritual trip. I went, to see. I love travel and all that, but we went to the Buddhist school, so it wasn't a monastery. It's where the monks were trained and taught, and there was an old monk and a new monk there. It's like a classic story. And the new monk was working really hard to control his mind, his thoughts. That was the thoughts of selfishness and greed and wants and all that. He spent all his life. And the old monk said, "Do good." And so I think if we concentrate on what's wrong, we're not going to do the right thing here. I think if we keep looking at where we can give and what we can do and appreciate the sweetness, I keep seeing sweetness on the streets. I saw this nun in her little, nun thing, and we don't see nuns in habits in
not
LA.
Really, not usually.
And she's getting on her bicycle, right? And she was taking an art class, I think, at the thing. And she gets on her bicycle and she's going through Santa Croce. And I don't know, it just warmed my heart.
Yeah.
And there is so much beautiful exhibits here every day. I just wander into a church or exhibit in museum every day. You can do it. So to appreciate and I share these things. I share. I was with a family that's been living here for 2 years, and they didn't know something, and they said, "How'd you know about it?" I said, "I don't know. I just read it in the Florentine."
Right? Yeah, exactly.
So the more we do good, the more we make connections, the more we'll keep it. That's the only thing I know, and to keep doing good, and that progress in that way will continue.
Yeah, I agree 100%, and I also think that by building community, by connecting, by showing that we care about the things that we love, and that shows how much we want to preserve. And I don't think it's too late. I get
neither do I.
Certain decisions are propelled by economics, but very little isn't today. But there is a lot of humanity left here, and it's exactly what we were talking about before. It's funny because I was at the supermarket last week, and there were 2 monks doing their food shop, like doing the grocery shopping. And it was, I don't know what they were buying, like a lot of cleaning supplies. So they must have been, I don't know. It was just, and I stopped and I thought, this is like, I would never, like, where would I ever see something like this? Right. And I kept running, like as I was going to do my shopping, I kept like running into them, we sort of were, like, hello, and it just, I thought to myself, this is just like an incredible experience, and I think that openness, I love your whole approach to life. And I'm getting to the last question here, and I kind of can't wait to hear the answer, but it's the question I ask all my guests at the end of the podcast. So what's next for you, Nita?
I don't know. And, it's really interesting that I just finished this book about principles and clarifying principles and living by them, on the Nobility book. And I realized at this point, I turned 75 on May 3rd. May 4th, my husband died. If this isn't another chapter, I don't know. So, and I'm living with two principles right now. The first one is, I don't know. And that's hard for me to live by. I have to remember to do it, because I've lived so much with intention, what I'm doing and all that. So I don't know is an intentional principle. And the other one is I don't have to.
Yeah.
Because I've had a lot of have-tos, you too, and you were so I don't have to right now. I don't have to make a decision. I don't have to. And it's interesting with these principles, I'm maybe 3/4 through my next book.
Oh, yeah?
I've had a lot of attention span and it's a book about living inside tragedy, which is, which is going to be called How Not to Stay Single When Your Husband Has Alzheimer's and 2 Girlfriends, which is, kind of the heartbreaking and of that. So I don't know. I really don't know.
I can't wait to read it.
Yeah.
I can't wait to hear about everything you're doing. I hope you'll come back on the podcast, maybe when I know you're going to leave Florence, in a month's time. But when you come back, we could absolutely have a follow-up chat.
Love
and
it.
I want to read this book. I want to read everything you've written, and I'm living by your principles. I'm serious. It's been such a delight to have you here and talk to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming on the podcast.